Hello everybody. This module is an attempt to present the highlights of the essay Spontaneity, Its Strength and Weakness, which is an important chapter in Frantz Fanon's book titled The Wretched of the Earth. The Wretched of the Earth, published in 1961, was written by Ibrahim Frantz Fanon during the height of the Algerian War of Independence. The insightful deliberations of this book provide inspiration for all anti-colonial movements. Frantz Fanon was a French West Indian psychiatrist who exposed the connection between colonial war and mental ill health and showed how the fight for liberation must be combined with building a national culture and then achieved through revolutionary violence. Fanon's ideas were thought-provoking and they influenced the post-colonial critical studies. Black Skin, White Masks is yet another book in which Fanon shares his own experiences in addition to presenting the effects of racism and dehumanization inherent in situations of colonial domination. Decolonization, that is the liberation of a nation, cannot be sought on the basis of a gentleman's agreement. It is a never-ending perennial struggle. Fanon assures that violence as a powerful tool has a magical effect on the indigenous people as it sloughs off their sense of inferiority and empowers them. In Spontaneity, Its Strength and Weakness, Fanon reiterates the importance of violence in the process of decolonization. In the opening lines of the chapter, Fanon identifies a difference of rhythm between the leaders of the Nationalist Party and the mass of the people. In the colonized countries, the leaders of the parties are the educated town dwellers, whereas the mass of people include the peasants. There is always a discontentment between the rank and file and their leaders. The former continues to demand for a total change to happen, while the latter restrains and limits the demands of the workers. The parties evince a distrust for the rural folks and the peasants find themselves betrayed. The members of the parties are the shop stewards, industrial workers, intellectuals and shopkeepers who believe in technical advances and venture to change the traditional customs. On the other hand, the peasants continue to uphold long cherished values and fortify traditional customs. Hence, we find a lot of marabouts, that is the African Muslim religious leaders, witch doctors and customary chieftains among the country dwellers. Fanon is of the view that the intellectual national parties miserably failed to address the needs of the rural folk, and this had led to a division between the two. According to the writer, this division is a division between the privileged and the least privileged inside the colonized population. The country folks suspect the townsmen because the latter aid their European masters and re-establish the tactics of the colonial machinery. Hence, the country folks call them as traitors and knaves as they uphold the policies of colonialism. The country people continue to look at the townsfolk as immoral and untrustworthy. This antagonism between the native and his counterpart creates a favorable ambience for the colonial powers to continue their exploitation. Fanon also points out the plotting of the leaders of the party. They derive vicarious pleasure by remaining indifferent and unwilling to plunge into serious action. They also refuse to direct the propaganda towards the rural masses. It is ironic that the peasants are the real participators in any revolution. They are the most spontaneous and aggressive lot. Although the leaders of the party failed to organize the country districts, they ruthlessly sabotaged the living tradition of the natives. Moreover, The leaders did not help the country folks to channelize their spontaneity and rage in a proper way. Thereby, they pose a threat to the native society. The peasants were denied of their political education, the traditional chiefs were looked down upon, and the old men in the traditional societies were held up to ridicule. The colonialists exploit this unhealthy situation by setting the peasants against the city dwellers. On their part, the parties failed to take part in the struggle and played a dual game. For example, during the Mau Mau revolt in Kenya, the British colonial authorities and the missionaries prevented the influx of the Kenyans from the country districts and forests. When these folks could not find a market for their labor, they became robbers, drunkards, and even prostitutes. The same thing happened in Congo when the countryside young hooligans were driven back into the forests. Like the political parties, that is the urban proletariat, the labor unions also isolated themselves from the peasants of the country districts. But the peasant masses, that is the lumpen proletariat, are the only aggressive force in the country, and according to Fanon, they are important for any revolutionary cause. At times of rebellion in town, the peasants relocate to the cities and are ready with their makeshift shanties. The struggle always assumes titanic shapes. Sometimes the party ruptures and divisions were created. Some leaders were marked out for police repression under the colonialists. They were boycotted and hence they ran towards the countryside and the peasantry protected them from the police. There came the right moment for them to discover that the mass of the country people have never ceased to think in terms of violence, repossessing land, national struggle, and armed insurrection. Fanon describes the lumpen proletariat as members of a group of the peasant masses occupying the lowest rung of the social order. They were usually criminals, unemployed, prostitutes, and juvenile delinquents. In spite of the pressurizing situation and constant danger, the lumpen proletariat had its own logic, and these idlers could not be reformed. But the colonial machinery devised ways to exploit the lumpen proletariat. The cry for any national revelation can easily grab the attention of the lumpen proletariat. They can easily be persuaded to take up arms with the colonialists. In this bargain, the colonizers very easily cheated the lumpen proletariats. Fanon gives examples of what happened in Algeria, Angola, and Congo. In Angola, the lumpen proletariat preceded the Portuguese armed columns, and in Congo, they were used by the enemies of the Congo to organize spontaneous mass meetings against Lumumba, the first president of Congo. It is very obvious from what Fanon presents that the enemy, not only the colonizers but also the other privileged, is too aware of these ideological weaknesses, spiritual instability of the population, and the physiological wretchedness of the peasants. During the colonialist maneuvers, the sociologists throw light on various complexes: frustration complex, belligerent complex, and the colonizability complex. The native's consciousness is so precarious and weak that he is taken aback even by a spark of kindliness. But Fanon warns that the native can go in for a small compromise but should never surrender. As a concluding note, Fanon affirms that it is violence alone, violence committed by the people, violence organized and educated by its leaders, makes it possible for the masses to understand social truths. Independence does not mean just a few readaptations, reforms, the flying flag, but when the undivided mass still live in the dark ages, it is time to think about. Before I close, I wish to tell you that this module gives only an outline of the chapters Spontaneity, its strength and weakness. For an in-depth understanding, go in for a close reading of Franz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. Thank you.